The warm glow of gaslight spilled from the windows, casting long shadows across the well-manicured lawn. Inside, the air hummed with the gentle chaos of family life. The patter of little feet echoed through the halls, mingling with the rustle of bedtime stories and Nana's occasional bark as she herded her young charges. The Darling household was a symphony of domestic bliss, each note perfectly in tune with the rhythm of their nightly routine. As twilight painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold, Mrs. Darling found herself drawn to the nursery window, the cool glass pressed against her palms as she leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. There, just beyond the pane, hovered a boy's face, his wild, tousled hair, framed eyes that sparkled with mischief and adventure. Mrs. Darling's heart raced, her mind struggling to comprehend the impossible sight before her. But in the blink of an eye, he vanished, leaving her to wonder if she had imagined the whole thing. Shaking off her bewilderment, she approached the window once more. Her silk dress whispered against the floorboards, the sound barely audible over the pounding of her heart. As she peered out into the gathering darkness, something caught her eye. A shadow detached from its owner, fluttering like a trapped bird against the nursery wall. With trembling hands, she managed to capture the elusive thing, its texture oddly cool and smooth, like liquid night. She folded it neatly, tucking it away in a drawer for safekeeping, her mind whirling with questions she dared not voice aloud. The tranquil atmosphere was shattered by Mr. Darling's voice echoing through the house, his tone tinged with exasperation. "That dog has no place in a respectable home," he declared, adjusting his bow tie with an air of self-importance. The silk fabric rustled beneath his fingers, a stark contrast to Nana's soft fur as she lowered her head and whined softly, sensing the shift in mood. Mrs. Darling's brow furrowed with concern, her voice gentle but firm as she pleaded, "But dear, the children adore her, and she's been such a wonderful nursemaid." The love for her children and their canine companion was evident in every word, her eyes imploring her husband to reconsider. But Mr. Darling would not be swayed. His patience, as thin as the last page of a well-loved book, had finally run out. With a dramatic flourish that sent his coattails flapping, he pointed towards the yard. "Out! Out with you, Nana!" The children watched, wide-eyed and silent, as their beloved guardian was led away. Wendy's lower lip trembled, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. John's fist clenched at his sides, his knuckles white with suppressed emotion. Little Michael buried his face in his sister's skirt, his small body shaking with silent sobs. The nursery, once a haven of warmth and security, suddenly felt colder, emptier, as if all the joy had been sucked out along with Nana. As Mr. and Mrs. Darling prepared for their evening out, an unsettling quiet descended upon the house. It was as if the very air held its breath, waiting for something to happen. Mrs. Darling couldn't shake the feeling that leaving the children alone tonight was a terrible mistake. She lingered in the doorway, her eyes scanning the familiar contours of the nursery, as if trying to memorize every detail. The soft glow of the nightlight, the gentle sway of the curtains in the evening breeze, the comforting bulk of the toy chest in the corner. "Come along, my dear," Mr. Darling called from downstairs, his impatience evident in every syllable. "We'll be late for the party." His voice carried a note of finality. Brooking no argument, Mrs. Darling hesitated, her hand resting on the doorknob. She looked back at her children, their small faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. A chill ran down her spine, like the touch of a cold finger. Something was coming. She could feel it in her bones. But what? The shadow in the drawer seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, as if responding to her unspoken fears. With a heavy heart and a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she blew a kiss to her little ones. "Sweet dreams, my darlings. We'll be home before you know it." The words felt hollow, even as she spoke them, a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. As the front door clicked shut behind Mr. and Mrs. Darling, the house seemed to hold its breath. The children huddled together in the nursery, the absence of Nana's comforting presence keenly felt. Outside, the stars winked into existence one by one, like curious eyes peering down at the Darling home. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree that stood sentinel by the window, its branches scraping against the glass in an almost beckoning gesture. The stage was set for an extraordinary night, one that would change the darling children's lives forever. As the clock struck the hour, a shadow fell across the nursery window. A boy's silhouette, lithe and nimble, perched on the sill. His eyes, bright with adventure, scanned the room. He had come for something he had lost, something hidden away in a drawer. And as he slipped silently into the nursery, the darling children's world teetered on the brink of an incredible journey. The night had grown late, and a hush had fallen over the darling nursery. It was in this quiet moment that Peter Pan, an eternally young boy with the magical ability to fly, slipped through the window in search of his lost shadow. Moonbeams cascaded through the curtains, painting the room in a soft, silvery glow. The air was thick with the scent of dreams and childhood innocence. Peter's eyes, bright as starlight and full of mischief, darted about the room. His nimble form cast fleeting shadows as he moved, a dance of light and dark that mirrored his own nature. With fingers that had never known the touch of responsibility, Peter grasped at his elusive shadow. It slipped through his grasp like smoke, teasing and taunting him. His attempts grew more frantic, his movements a whirlwind of frustration and determination. The commotion stirred the air, rustling the curtains and tickling Wendy's nose. Wendy's eyes fluttered open, sleep still clinging to her lashes. Her heart leapt into her throat as she beheld the strange figure bathed in moonlight. Peter stood frozen, caught in the act of his midnight mission. His clothes, a patchwork of leaves and cobwebs, rustled softly with each breath. His hair was a wild tangle, as if he'd just rolled out of a nest of twigs and feathers. Who are you?" Wendy's whisper was a mix of fear and wonder, barely audible over the pounding of her heart. Peter's face split into a grin, as bright and mischievous as a pixie's laugh. "I'm Peter Pan," he declared, his voice a melody of adventure and eternal youth. Wendy's practical nature took over as she noticed his struggle. "Oh, you silly boy," she said, her voice gaining strength as she climbed out of bed. The cool floor beneath her feet grounded her in reality, even as the impossible stood before her. You can't stick a shadow on with soap. It needs to be sewn on properly. With deft fingers that spoke of many hours spent mending her brother's clothes, Wendy threaded a needle. The soft scratch of thread through fabric filled the air as she began to attach Peter's shadow. As she worked, Peter's words painted vivid pictures of a world beyond her wildest dreams. "There are mermaids," Peter said, his eyes sparkling like sunlight on waves. "Their scales shimmer like jewels, and their songs can enchant even the bravest sailor." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "And fairies. They flit about like living stars, leaving trails of magic in their wake." Wendy's needle paused mid-stitch, her imagination caught in the web of Peter's tales. "Fairies, real fairies." Peter nodded, his enthusiasm infectious. "And pirates, too. Captain Hook and his crew sail the Neverland waters, always on the lookout for treasure. And me." He puffed out his chest, pride radiating from every pore. As Wendy tied off the last stitch, a wave of gratitude washed over Peter's face, quickly replaced by unbridled excitement. "Come with me to Neverland, Wendy," he exclaimed, bouncing on his toes. "You and your brothers. It's a place where time stands still, where children never grow up, and where adventure lurks around every corner." Wendy's heart raced at the thought, a mix of longing and trepidation swirling in her chest. She turned to wake John and Michael, her whispers urgent and filled with wonder. The boys stirred, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Their jaws dropped as they took in the extraordinary sight of Peter Pan standing in their nursery, bathed in moonlight and possibility. Just then, a tiny ball of light zipped into the room, leaving a trail of golden sparkles in its wake. It circled Peter's head before coming to rest on his shoulder, its glow pulsing like a tiny heartbeat. It was Tinker Bell, Peter's fairy companion, her diminutive form radiating a soft golden light. "This is Tink," Peter explained as the fairy's bell-like voice tinkled in the air, a melody of chimes and whispers. Wendy leaned in closer, fascinated by the tiny creature. Tinker Bell, however, was less than pleased. Her light flashed a jealous red, and she tugged at Peter's ear, her tinkling voice taking on a sharp edge. Peter laughed. the sound as carefree as a summer breeze. "Now," he said, his voice filled with the promise of adventure, "who wants to fly to Neverland?" The darling children gasped in unison, their eyes wide with disbelief and hope. "Fly?" John asked, his voice cracking with excitement. "But how?" Peter's grin widened, a secret about to be shared. "It's easy. All you need is faith, trust, and a little bit of pixie dust." He gently cupped Tinker Bell in his hands, her light pulsing with indignation. With a gentle shake, he released a shower of golden dust over the children. It sparkled in the air, settling on their skin like stardust. "Now think of the happiest things. It's the same as having wings." Wendy closed her eyes, her mind filled with visions of fairies dancing on flower petals and mermaids singing beneath a moonlit sea. John imagined soaring over pirate ships, the wind in his hair and adventure in his heart. Michael dreamed of a land where bedtimes didn't exist, and every day was filled with games and laughter. Slowly, miraculously, their feet left the ground. They floated in the air like leaves on a breeze, their nightgowns billowing around them. Laughter bubbled up from their throats, pure joy given voice. They twirled and swooped around the nursery, marveling at their newfound freedom. Peter watched with pride, his hands on his hips and a satisfied smile on his face. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, Peter knew it was time to leave. He flew to the window and turned back to the darling children, who were still reveling in their magical flight. "Ready for the adventure of a lifetime?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with the promise of endless wonders. Wendy, John, and Michael nodded eagerly, their faces flushed with excitement in the thrill of the unknown. Peter turned to Tinker Bell, who hovered nearby, her tiny arms crossed and a scowl on her face. "Tink," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I need you to guide the way to Neverland." Tinker Bell's light dimmed slightly, her reluctance clear in every flicker. But as Peter's gaze remained steady, she finally nodded, her bell-like voice chiming in resigned agreement. With a whoop of joy that echoed through the quiet streets of London, Peter leapt from the window. The darling children followed close behind, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Tinker Bell, still grumbling in her bell language, zipped ahead, leaving a trail of sparkling dust for them to follow. As they soared higher, the city below grew smaller, its lights twinkling like fallen stars. The wind whispered promises of adventure in their ears, and the night sky stretched out before them, vast and full of possibility. They flew toward the second star to the right, their path straight on till morning. Just as the last rooftop disappeared from view, a shadow fell across the moon. The children gasped as a massive shape loomed before them, its sails billowing in the night breeze. A flag snapped in the wind, bearing the unmistakable symbol of a skull and crossbones. Peter's eyes narrowed, a mix of excitement and wariness crossing his face. He turned to the darling children, his voice low and urgent. "Hold on tight," he whispered, "and whatever you do, don't make a sound. We're about to fly right over Captain Hook's ship." The children's eyes widened in fear and anticipation. As they approached the pirate ship, the adventure they had dreamed of suddenly became very real and very dangerous. Peter Pan stood before Wendy, John, and Michael, his eyes twinkling with mischief. With a playful grin, he beckoned them to join him on an adventure beyond their wildest dreams. The air crackled with excitement as Peter sprinkled shimmering pixie dust over the children. Their hearts raced, a mixture of anticipation and nervousness coursing through their veins. With a deep breath and a leap of faith, they found themselves airborne, defying gravity and soaring into the night sky. The cool night air rushed past their faces, tousling their hair and sending shivers down their spines. Below them, London sprawled out like a living, breathing entity. The city's twinkling lights formed a mesmerizing tapestry, each pinprick of brightness a story waiting to be told. Streets twisted and turned, creating shadowy mazes punctuated by the warm glow of street lamps. Big Ben stood sentinel over the sleeping city, its illuminated face a comforting beacon in the darkness. The majestic dome of St. Paul's Cathedral caught the moonlight, its silhouette a testament to human ambition and artistry. As they climbed higher, the familiar landmarks of their home shrank away, replaced by an endless expanse of starry sky. Wendy's heart pounded in her chest, a mix of exhilaration and fear. She glanced at her brothers, their faces alight with wonder, and felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. John's eyes darted about, trying to take in every detail of their fantastical journey. Michael, the youngest, giggled with unbridled joy as he twirled and looped through the air, reveling in his newfound freedom. "Look there!" Peter's voice cut through the night, pointing to a cluster of stars. "That's the Big Dipper. Follow the edge of the bowl, and it'll lead you to the North Star." John, ever the inquisitive one, bombarded Peter with questions about celestial navigation. His mind whirred with the possibilities of this new knowledge, imagining himself as a great explorer charting unknown territories. As they journeyed on, the stars seemed to grow impossibly bright and close, as if reaching out to greet them. Wendy felt as though she could pluck the twinkling lights right out of the sky and tuck them into her pocket. Suddenly, Peter's excited shout pierced the air. "There it is! Neverland!" In the distance, an island materialized from the mist like a dream taking shape. As they drew nearer, details began to emerge, each one more fantastical than the last. Lush forests carpeted the landscape, their leaves rustling with secrets. Golden beaches stretched along the shoreline, promising hidden treasures and sun-soaked adventures. Craggy cliffs rose defiantly from the sea, daring the waves to challenge their might. The island pulsed with an otherworldly energy, as if it were alive and breathing. The air grew thick with the scent of salt and tropical flowers, a heady mixture that made the children's heads spin with anticipation. Peter, barely able to contain his excitement, pointed out the sights. "See that ship in the bay? That's Captain Hook's pirate ship. And over there, hidden in the trees, that's the Indian camp." The children's eyes darted from one marvel to the next, drinking in the wonders of this magical realm. The Mermaid Lagoon shimmered like liquid silver under the moon's gentle gaze, its waters promising both allure and danger. Somewhere in the heart of the island, concealed by thick foliage, lay the Lost Boys' underground home, a sanctuary of eternal youth and adventure. As they approached, the island stirred from its slumber. The crash of waves against the shore grew louder, a rhythmic heartbeat welcoming them home. Strange, exotic bird calls echoed through the night, a symphony of the unknown. Wendy felt a knot of excitement and nervousness tighten in her stomach. She glanced at John, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to memorize every detail of the landscape. Michael was practically vibrating with eagerness to explore, his young face alight with joy. As they descended towards the island, the air grew warmer, embracing them like a welcoming hug. The scent of adventure filled their lungs, promising a world of endless possibilities. Wendy's mind raced with thoughts of the challenges and wonders that lay ahead. What secrets did this magical island hold? What dangers lurked in its shadows? Just as their feet were about to touch the ground, a sudden gust of wind caught them off guard. The children tumbled through the air, their hearts leaping into their throats. As they struggled to regain control, the island below seemed to shift and change, its landscape morphing before their very eyes. In that moment of chaos and wonder, one thought echoed through their minds. What kind of world were they really entering? The darling children's feet touched down on Neverland for the first time. They felt the soft, springy grass beneath their toes as their eyes widened with wonder at the magical landscape before them. The air was thick with the scent of adventure, a heady mix of salt spray, exotic flowers, and something indefinably wild. Peter Pan, his face alight with a proud grin, beckoned the newcomers forward. "Come on," he called, his voice carrying on the warm breeze. "I want you to meet my family." He led them through a tangle of vines and oversized leaves to a sun-dappled clearing. There, a ragtag group of boys stood waiting, their mismatched clothes fashioned from leaves and animal skins, rustling softly in the gentle wind. "These are the Lost Boys," Peter announced, chest puffing out like a proud rooster. One by one, the Lost Boys stepped forward, each introduction as unique as their personalities. Slightly, with eyes that sparkled with intelligence, gave a clever bow. Nibs, standing tall and proud, thumped his chest in a show of bravery, Curly's mischievous grin spread across his freckled face as he performed a playful somersault. The twins, moving in perfect sync, finished each other's sentences as they welcomed the newcomers. Wendy, John, and Michael exchanged excited glances, their hearts racing with the thrill of it all. The Lost Boys circled around them like curious puppies, peppering them with questions about the world they'd left behind. The air buzzed with their chatter, a symphony of boyish excitement and wonder. As the noise died down, Peter's eyes lit up with that familiar spark of an idea. "Let's go to the Mermaid Lagoon," he exclaimed. Without waiting for a response, he leapt into the air, his body as light as a feather. The others followed suit, some more gracefully than others, as they soared over the lush Neverland forest. The wind whipped through their hair as they flew, the island stretching out beneath them like a vibrant patchwork quilt. Wendy's stomach fluttered, not just from the exhilaration of flight, but from the sheer magic of it all. Suddenly the lagoon appeared before them, a shimmering expanse of turquoise water dotted with smooth, sun-warmed rocks. And there, lounging on those rocks like living sculptures, were the mermaids. Their scales glinted like precious gems in the sunlight, each movement sending ripples of color across the water. Their long hair flowed like silk in the gentle breeze, seeming to dance of its own accord. John and Michael gaped in awe, their jaws hanging open. The mermaids' beauty was hypnotic, their melodious voices weaving an enchanting spell through the air. Wendy, however, felt a prickle of unease crawl up her spine. She noticed the sharp teeth behind those alluring smiles and the calculating look in their eyes, cold as the depths of the sea. Peter, oblivious to Wendy's concerns, dove down to the water's edge. He began to converse with the mermaids in a series of clicks and whistles that sounded both foreign and strangely familiar to the darling children's ears. The mermaids responded in kind, their laughter like tinkling bells carried on the breeze. "How does he do that?" John whispered, his voice filled with admiration and a hint of envy. "It's just another of Peter's talents," Wendy replied, trying to keep the worry from her voice. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to these beautiful creatures than met the eye. As they moved away from the lagoon, the magical essence of Neverland seemed to intensify. Tiny fairies, no bigger than a child's hand, darted between the trees, leaving trails of glittering dust in their wake. The air sparkled with their passing, like stars brought down to earth. Birds with feathers of impossible colors soared overhead, their calls a symphony of exotic sounds that seemed to paint the very air with music. Suddenly, a low, ominous, ticking sound reached their ears, cutting through the magical atmosphere like a knife. The Lost Boys froze, their faces pale with fear. "The crocodile," slightly whispered, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. In the distance, they caught a glimpse of green scales and yellow eyes as the feared reptile slipped beneath the water's surface. The children huddled closer together, their hearts pounding in their chests like drums. The once inviting water now seemed dark and foreboding, hiding untold dangers beneath its surface. As the day wore on, the darling children found themselves both exhilarated and overwhelmed by the wonders of Neverland. Every turn brought a new marvel, every moment filled with magic beyond their wildest dreams. Yet as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, a small part of them couldn't help but think of the home they'd left behind. They stood on a cliff overlooking the island, the breeze ruffling their hair. The beauty of Neverland stretched out before them, promising endless adventures. But with that promise came a hint of danger, a whisper of the unknown. The children were both thrilled and slightly overwhelmed by the wonders of their new surroundings, their minds racing with the possibilities that lay ahead in this magical realm. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Wendy felt a strange tugging in her heart. She looked at the Lost Boys, their faces alight with joy and mischief, and something stirred within her. A warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name. Little did she know, as the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, that this feeling would soon blossom into something that would change their Neverland adventure in ways she could never have imagined. As the days in Neverland unfold, Wendy naturally slips into a maternal role among the Lost Boys. She begins to care for them in ways they've never experienced before, bringing a touch of home to their wild existence. The underground home, once a chaotic den of boyish mischief, transforms under Wendy's gentle touch. The earthy smell of damp soil mingles with the sweet aroma of wildflowers she's gathered to brighten the space. Soft animal furs line the floor, creating cozy nooks where the boys gather eagerly for bedtime stories. Wendy's voice, warm and soothing, weaves tales of faraway lands and brave heroes. The flickering firelight casts dancing shadows on the earthen walls, and the boys' eyes grow wide with wonder. They lean in, hanging on her every word, their usual restlessness forgotten in the magic of her storytelling. With nimble fingers, Wendy mends torn clothes, her needle flashing in and out of fabric like a tiny silver fish. The boys watch, mesmerized, as their ragged garments become whole again. It's a small miracle in their eyes, and they run their fingers over the neat stitches in awe. "Toodles, please pass the berries to Nibs," Wendy says softly, her gentle guidance transforming meal times from chaotic free-for-alls to moments of shared joy. The boys comply, their usual grabbing and snatching replaced by careful hands and polite words. Peter Pan observes these changes with a mixture of fascination and unease. He perches on a gnarled root that juts into their underground home, his wild hair tousled and his eyes following Wendy's every move. The comfort she brings is undeniable. The boys' laughter seems brighter, their eyes clearer. Yet as she organizes their days into a semblance of order, Peter feels a twinge of something unfamiliar. It's as if the wild, carefree spirit of Neverland is being tamed, and he's not sure he likes it. Meanwhile, John and Michael throw themselves into the adventurous life of Neverland with unbridled enthusiasm. The jungle becomes their playground, a riot of color and sound that ignites their imagination. They join in hunts, their whoops and hollers echoing through the dense foliage as they chase after magical creatures. "Look, John!" Michael cries out one day, pointing to a shimmering pool hidden behind a curtain of vines. The water sparkles like liquid diamonds, inviting and mysterious. "Do you think mermaids swim in there?" John adjusts his glasses, a habit he hasn't quite shaken off despite their newfound wildness. "Only one way to find out, little brother." And with that, they plunge into another exciting exploration, the cool water embracing them as they search for signs of mythical life. The Lost Boys welcome John and Michael into their ranks with open arms. They teach them the secret paths of the island, showing them how to swing from vines and identify which fruits are safe to eat. Together they play endless games, their laughter carried on the warm Neverland breeze, a joyous soundtrack to their days of adventure. But not everyone is pleased with the new arrangements. Tinker Bell, once the undisputed queen of Peter's attention, finds herself pushed to the sidelines. She watches with growing resentment as Wendy's influence over Peter and the boys increases day by day. The tiny fairy's light, usually a warm golden glow, takes on a reddish tinge of jealousy, pulsing with her anger. Tinker Bell's bell-like voice, understood only by Peter, becomes sharp and insistent. "Peter, let's go on an adventure. Just the two of us," she chimes, trying to draw him away from Wendy's latest story. Her tiny hands tug at his ear, her wings beating furiously. Peter, torn between his loyalty to Tinker Bell and his fascination with Wendy, hesitates. This hesitation only fuels Tinker Bell's determination. She begins to plot, her tiny mind whirring with plans to remove Wendy from Neverland and restore things to the way they were. As the days pass, the dynamics of the group shift like the ever-changing landscape of Neverland itself. Wendy's presence brings a warmth and structure that the boys didn't know they were missing, creating a sense of family in their makeshift home. Yet this very comfort creates an undercurrent of tension, a clash between the wild freedom of Neverland and the gentle constraints of growing up. The once carefree existence of Peter and the Lost Boys now balances on a knife's edge. Wendy's nurturing influence and Tinker Bell's simmering jealousy create a complex web of emotions, threatening to forever change the magical world of Neverland. As night falls and the stars twinkle overhead, the island holds its breath, waiting to see how this delicate balance will tip. The warm breeze carries a hint of salt, and in the distance, the faint sound of waves crashing against the shore grows louder. Peter's keen ears pick up an unfamiliar creaking sound, and his eyes widen as he spots a dark shape on the horizon. A chill runs down his spine as he realizes what it is: a pirate ship, its black flag fluttering ominously in the moonlight. drawing ever closer to their peaceful haven. The pirate ship loomed ominously off Neverland's coast. Its black flag fluttered in the salty breeze, a sinister warning to all who dared approach. On its weathered deck, Captain James Hook stood tall, his elaborate coat a stark contrast to the shabby attire of his crew. The salty air whipped around him, carrying the acrid scent of gunpowder and the metallic tang of blood. Hook's eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the horizon as he received word of new arrivals on the island. His right hand, replaced by a gleaming silver hook, caught the sunlight and sent shivers down the spines of his men. It was a constant reminder of his last encounter with the flying boy who haunted his every waking moment. New arrivals, you say? Hook mused, his voice as smooth as silk, but laced with venom. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and threat. How interesting. The captain's mind raced with possibilities, each more devious than the last. His obsession with revenge against Peter Pan had become all-consuming, like a wildfire that raged through a drought-stricken forest. Hook's remaining fingers drummed against the ship's railing, the sound a staccato rhythm that matched the pounding of his black heart. "Smee!" he barked, his voice cutting through the sea air like a knife. Mr. Smee, a portly man with a perpetually worried expression, came bumbling across the deck. His feet slapped against the worn planks, echoing Hook's impatience. "Aye, Captain?" "Gather the crew," Hook ordered, his eyes never leaving the distant shoreline of Neverland. The island seemed to shimmer in the heat haze, a tantalizing mirage of adventure and danger. "It's time we paid our young friend a visit." As the pirates assembled, their weapons clanking ominously, Hook outlined his scheme. His words painted a picture of triumph, of Peter Pan finally within their grasp. The crew listened, their excitement growing with each detail, like a pot slowly coming to boil. They would send spies to observe Peter's hideout, learning the children's routines and uncovering their weaknesses. Days passed, and the pirates slipped through the lush Neverland jungle like shadows. The dense foliage whispered secrets as they passed, the very air thick with tension. They watched from afar as Peter and the children played their carefree games, oblivious to the danger that lurked just beyond the tree line. The pirates meticulously mapped out the location of the underground home, noting every entrance and exit, their crude drawings a web of potential traps. Back on the ship, Hook pored over the information his men brought him. His hook traced invisible patterns on the maps, each movement bringing him closer to his goal. The captain's eyes gleamed with anticipation, like a predator about to pounce on unsuspecting prey. "Soon," he whispered to himself, the word barely audible over the creaking of the ship. "Soon you'll be mine, Peter Pan." As Hook's plans took shape, a change came over Neverland. The once vibrant colors seemed to dim, as if the island itself sensed the approaching danger. The carefree laughter of the children echoed less frequently through the trees, replaced by an unsettling quiet that hung in the air like a shroud. Peter, ever attuned to the rhythms of his island home, felt the shift. His brow furrowed as he soared over the treetops, sharp eyes scanning for any sign of trouble. The wind that usually carried him effortlessly now seemed to push against him, as if trying to warn him of impending doom. Though he couldn't put his finger on it, Peter knew something was amiss. "Lost boys," he called out, landing gracefully in their clearing. The sound of his feet touching the ground seemed unnaturally loud in the eerie silence. "We must be on our guard. Double the patrols around our home." The boys nodded eagerly, always ready for a new adventure. They scattered into the forest, weapons at the ready, unaware of the true extent of the danger that lurked in the shadows. The sound of their footsteps faded, leaving Peter alone with his thoughts in the growing sense of unease. As night fell over Neverland, two worlds teetered on the brink of collision. In his underground hideout, Peter Pan slept fitfully, his dreams filled with vague warnings he couldn't quite grasp. Sweat beaded on his brow as he tossed and turned, fighting invisible enemies. And on the pirate ship, Captain Hook stood at the bow, his hook glinting in the moonlight. A sinister smile played across his lips as he gazed toward the island, ready to set his plan in motion. The air crackled with anticipation, like the moment before a lightning strike. As the first light of dawn began to break over Neverland, Peter's eyes snapped open. He sat up, heart racing, every sense on high alert. Something was different. Something was wrong. He leapt to his feet, ready to rally the lost boys for another day of adventure. But as he emerged from the hideout, the sight that greeted him made his blood run cold. The familiar landscape of Neverland had changed overnight, and what Peter saw filled him with a dread he had never known before. Peter and the children were embarking on another thrilling adventure in Neverland. Their exploration led them to a shocking discovery that would change the course of their day. The lush emerald foliage of Neverland rustled with whispers of excitement as Peter, Wendy, John, and Michael pushed through the dense undergrowth. The air was thick with the scent of adventure, a heady mix of salt spray and tropical flowers. Suddenly, they stumbled upon news that sent a chill through their bones. Tiger Lily, the brave and beautiful princess of the Native American tribe, had been captured by Captain Hook and his nefarious crew. Wendy's gasp cut through the air like a knife, her hand flying to her mouth. John and Michael exchanged worried glances, their eyes wide with fear and anticipation. But Peter, oh Peter, he stood tall, his eyes gleaming with a fire that could outshine the stars themselves. "We must save her," he declared, his voice ringing with the confidence of a born leader. The words hung in the air, electric with possibility. The pirates, like dark shadows against the setting sun, had taken Tiger Lily to Marooner's Rock. The very name sent shivers down the children's spines. It was a jagged outcropping of stone, surrounded by treacherous waters that rose and fell with the tide. The waves crashed against the rock's base, their sinister laughter echoing across the water, eager to claim any unfortunate soul who might fall into their clutches. Peter's mind raced like a whirlwind, piecing together a daring plan. His eyes sparkled with mischief and courage, a combination that always spelled trouble for his enemies. The lost boys leaned in close, hanging on his every word. "Listen closely," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "I have an idea." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the water, Peter put his plan into action. With the agility of a cat, he crept closer to the pirate crew. The rough voices of the buccaneers carried on the wind, punctuated by the occasional clang of metal and the creak of weathered wood. Tiger Lily stood proud and defiant, her dark eyes flashing with anger despite her predicament. The ropes binding her to the rock bit into her skin, but she didn't flinch. She was a warrior through and through. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air. Captain Hook's voice, but not from the captain himself. Peter, master of mimicry, had thrown his voice with uncanny accuracy. "You blithering idiots," the false Hook bellowed. "Can't you tie a simple knot? Release the girl at once." Confusion rippled through the pirate ranks like a stone dropped in a pond. They looked at each other, bewildered, as their real captain spluttered in rage and disbelief. The air crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. In the chaos that followed, Peter swooped in like a hawk. His movements were a blur as he sliced through Tiger Lily's bonds with a swiftness that left the pirates gaping. The princess, now free, didn't hesitate. She dove into the water with the grace of a dolphin, disappearing beneath the waves with barely a splash. Peter's laughter rang out, clear and triumphant, as he soared above the heads of the dumbfounded pirates. The wind whipped through his hair, carrying the sweet scent of victory. Hook's face contorted with fury, his hook glinting menacingly in the fading light. "Pan!" he roared, his voice a mixture of hatred and grudging admiration. "I'll get you for this." But Peter was already gone, escorting Tiger Lily safely back to her tribe. The Native Americans welcomed them with cheers and grateful embraces. The chief's eyes shone with pride and gratitude as he clasped Peter's hand, his weathered skin a stark contrast to Peter's youthful vigor. As they made their way back to their hideout, the darling children and the lost boys couldn't stop talking about Peter's daring rescue. Their eyes were wide with wonder, their voices filled with awe. "Did you see how he tricked them?" John exclaimed, his glasses slightly askew in his excitement. "And how fast he moved," Michael added, bouncing with every step. "It was like he was flying, even when he wasn't." Wendy watched Peter, noting the way he stood a little taller, his chest puffed out ever so slightly. She smiled, recognizing the mix of pride and nonchalance in his expression. Her heart swelled with admiration and something else, A feeling she couldn't quite name. The adventure had done more than save Tiger Lily. It had shown them all once again why Peter Pan was the heart and soul of Neverland. His courage, his cleverness, and his unwavering spirit were the stuff of legends. Legends that would be told and retold, in whispers around campfires and in the dreams of children, for years to come. As night fell over Neverland, wrapping the island in a blanket of stars, the children settled into their beds. The air was filled with the soft chirping of crickets and the distant lullaby of mermaids singing in the lagoon. But even as sleep claimed them, their minds were filled with images of their daring leader, the boy who could fly, who could outwit pirates, and who had once again proven that in Neverland anything was possible. Yet as the last embers of their celebratory fire died down, a chill wind swept through the trees. In the distance, a lone figure stood on the deck of a ship, his silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. Captain Hook's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light, his hook tapping rhythmically against the ship's railing. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The salty sea air hung heavy in Hook's cabin, thick with the scent of brine and desperation. Hunched over his desk, the pirate captain's hook glinted menacingly in the flickering candlelight, casting eerie shadows across the weathered wood. His hands trembled, a mix of rage and anticipation coursing through his veins as he carefully mixed a concoction of deadly herbs and potions. The result was a vial of poison as vibrant as a tropical sunset, its swirling colors masking its lethal nature. Hook's lips curled into a cruel smile, his eyes gleaming with malice as he disguised the poison as medicine. The question of how to deliver this fatal dose to his nemesis gnawed at him, until the answer presented itself in the form of a tiny, jealous fairy. Tinker Bell hovered nearby, her light pulsing with envy. Hook's silver tongue worked its magic, his voice as smooth as silk as he cooed. "My dear Tinker Bell, this medicine will rid us of Wendy forever. Peter will be yours alone." The fairy's wings fluttered in agreement, blinded by her emotions. She took the vial, its weight heavy with deadly promise. Meanwhile, in the cozy underground hideout, Wendy sat by the fire, her brow furrowed in concern. The warmth of the flames did little to ease the chill that had settled in her bones. Something felt off. The shadows seemed to dance more menacingly, and the wind whispered warnings through the trees. Her eyes darted around, taking in the unusual stillness that had settled over their home. As Tinker Bell approached, her telltale glow giving her away, Wendy's heart quickened. The fairy's erratic movements and furtive glances set off alarm bells in Wendy's mind. With the grace of a deer and the determination of a lioness, Wendy intercepted Tinker Bell. "What have you got there?" Wendy asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Tinker Bell's light flickered nervously, like a candle in a storm. Wendy's keen eyes took in every detail. The two bright colors of the liquid, the way Tinker Bell avoided her gaze, the faint smell of something acrid and wrong. In a flash of intuition, she connected the dots. "This isn't medicine, is it?" Wendy's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of her realization. Time seemed to stand still as Wendy's words hung in the air. Then chaos erupted. Peter, drawn by the commotion, bounded into view, his face a mixture of curiosity and concern. Wendy's quick thinking and even quicker reflexes snatched the vial from Tinker Bell's grasp, keeping it out of Peter's reach. As the truth unraveled like a poorly woven tapestry, the hideout buzzed with shock and betrayal. Peter's face, usually alight with mischief, darkened like a storm cloud. His voice, tinged with hurt and anger, rang out through the underground home. "Tink, how could you?" The fairy's light dimmed to a faint flicker, shame and regret evident in every droop of her wings. The betrayal cut deep, severing the bonds of trust that had held their little family together. With a heavy heart, Peter made his decision. "Tinker Bell," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "you are banished. Until you learn the true meaning of friendship and loyalty, you cannot return." As Tinker Bell's glow faded into the distance, a somber silence fell over the group. The incident had saved Peter's life, but at a great cost. The carefree spirit of Neverland seemed to dim, replaced by a newfound wariness. In his ship, Hook raged at his failed plan, his hook carving deep gouges into the wooden railings. The battle lines were drawn more clearly than ever, the stakes higher, the danger more real. As night fell over Neverland, the stars seemed to shine a little less brightly. The confrontation with Hook loomed on the horizon, a storm gathering strength, ready to break over their once peaceful island paradise. The air grew thick with tension, and a sense of foreboding settled over the island like a heavy fog. In the depths of his ship, Captain Hook's eyes blazed with a newfound determination. His hook gleamed in the moonlight as he leaned over a map of Neverland, his mind racing with possibilities. A wicked smile spread across his face as a new plan began to take shape, one that would bring the fight directly to Peter Pan's doorstep. The game was far from over, and the next move would change everything. Captain Hook's fury boiled over at the failure of his poison plot. His rage drove him to devise a bold, direct approach to defeat his young nemesis once and for all. The night air hung heavy with anticipation aboard the Jolly Roger. Hook paced the weathered deck, his polished hook catching the moonlight with each agitated turn. The wooden planks creaked beneath his boots, a rhythmic counterpoint to the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. "We strike at dawn," he growled, his voice rough with barely contained anger. The crew stirred, a mix of excitement and fear rippling through their ranks. Hook's eyes blazed with a potent cocktail of hatred and anticipation, reflecting the dancing flames of the ship's lanterns. As the first pale fingers of dawn crept across the sky, Hook led his band of cutthroats through the dense Neverland forest. The air was thick and humid, filled with the earthy scent of damp soil and tropical flowers. Leaves whispered against leather and steel as the pirates moved like shadows, their weapons at the ready. In the cozy warmth of the underground hideout, the Lost Boys slumbered peacefully, unaware of the danger lurking just above. Wendy stirred, her motherly instincts rousing her to prepare breakfast. The comforting smell of earth and pine permeated the air, soon to be shattered by the chaos to come. Suddenly, the tranquil morning exploded into mayhem. Battle cries tore through the air as Hook's men descended upon the hideout. The Lost Boys jolted awake, fumbling for weapons with sleep-clumsy hands. Wendy's heart hammered in her chest as she tried to gather the younger children, her wide eyes darting frantically for an escape route that didn't exist. John and Michael, still groggy from sleep, put up a valiant fight. The clash of metal on metal rang out, punctuated by the terrified screams of the children. Hook's laughter, cruel and triumphant, rose above the din like a terrible storm. "Where's Pan?" he roared, his hook glinting menacingly as he scanned the room. The absence of their leader was a palpable void, leaving the children feeling more vulnerable than ever. With Peter gone and caught completely off guard, the Lost Boys and the Darling children found themselves quickly overwhelmed. Smee, Hook's bumbling first mate, began tying up the captives, his face a mix of determination and reluctance. Hook's eyes gleamed with malicious delight as he surveyed his prisoners. "At last," he crowed, savoring each word. "I have you all in my grasp." His hook traced the air inches from Wendy's face, causing her to flinch despite her best efforts to appear brave. The cold metal seemed to radiate menace, making her skin crawl. The pirates herded their young captives through the forest, back to the shore where longboats awaited. The children stumbled along, some whimpering softly, others maintaining a defiant silence. Wendy's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan, but the shock of their capture left her thoughts scattered and unfocused. As they were roughly pushed into the boats, the reality of their situation began to sink in. The Jolly Roger loomed before them, no longer an exciting landmark on the Neverland horizon, but a foreboding prison ship. The gentle lapping of waves against the hull seemed to mock their predicament, a constant reminder of their powerlessness. Once aboard, Hook gathered the children on the main deck. His face was a mask of cruel joy as he paced before them, like a cat toying with cornered mice. "Welcome aboard, my young friends," he sneered, his voice dripping with false hospitality. "I do hope you'll enjoy your stay, short as it may be." The pirate crew jeered and laughed, brandishing their weapons. The glint of steel in the morning sun sent shivers down the children's spines. Hook raised his hand for silence, then continued with a wicked grin. "Who wants to be the first to walk the plank?" A collective shudder ran through the group of children. Wendy, summoning all her courage, stepped forward. Her legs trembled, but her voice grew stronger with each word. "You won't get away with this," she declared. "Peter will come for us." Hook's eyes narrowed dangerously, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Oh, I'm counting on it, my dear," he replied, his voice soft but filled with menace. "But I'm afraid your precious Peter Pan will be too late to save you all." As night fell over Neverland, the Jolly Roger became a floating fortress of fear. The captured children huddled together in the hold, the younger ones seeking comfort in Wendy's embrace. The air was thick with the smell of salt and unwashed bodies, making it hard to breathe. John and the older Lost Boys tried to put on brave faces, but their eyes betrayed their worry. Above them, they could hear the heavy footsteps of the pirates and the occasional bark of laughter. But it was the sound of Hook's pacing, the rhythmic tap of his boot followed by the scratch of his hook, that truly sent chills down their spines. It was like the ticking of a dreadful clock, counting down to their doom. In the darkness of the hold, surrounded by the creaking of timber and the gentle rocking of the ship, the children clung to hope. They whispered Peter's name like a prayer, willing him to swoop in and rescue them as he had so many times before. But as the hours ticked by, that hope began to flicker like a candle in the wind. Wendy, feeling the weight of responsibility on her young shoulders, did her best to keep everyone's spirits up. She told stories in hushed tones, tales of bravery and daring rescues. But even as she spoke, her eyes kept darting to the hatch above, silently pleading for it to burst open and reveal Peter's grinning face. As the night wore on, the ship became a place of fear and despair for the children. Hook's malevolent presence loomed over them like a dark cloud, promising a grim fate with the coming dawn. In the oppressive darkness, each creak and groan of the ship sounded like the approach of their captor, keeping them in a constant state of dread. Just as exhaustion began to overtake the children, a faint sound caught Wendy's attention. It was barely audible over the creaking of the ship, but unmistakable. The crow of a rooster. Her heart leapt with a mixture of hope and fear. Was it Peter, come to their rescue? Or was it just her imagination, fueled by desperation? As she strained her ears trying to hear it again, the hatch above them suddenly flew open with a bang. Peter Pan's heart pounded furiously as he learned of his friend's capture. Without hesitation, he sprang into action, his mind set on rescuing them from Captain Hook's clutches. The cool night air whistled past Peter's ears as he soared towards the Jolly Roger. Its dark silhouette loomed against the starry sky, a menacing shadow on the moonlit waters. As he drew closer, the acrid smell of gunpowder mingled with the salty sea air, filling his nostrils and stealing his resolve. Peter's keen eyes scanned the ship, drinking in every detail. The mast creaked ominously, sails fluttered like restless ghosts, and pirates scurried about the deck like frantic ants. His mind raced, forming a plan as swift and nimble as his flight. A mischievous grin spread across his face, eyes twinkling with the thrill of the challenge ahead. Swooping low, Peter circled the ship. His shadow danced across the waves, a playful spirit taunting the pirates below. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Taking a deep breath, he called out in a perfect imitation of Mr. Smee's gruff voice, "Captain, I've spotted a mermaid off the starboard bow." The effect was instantaneous. Pirates rushed to the side of the ship, leaving their posts unguarded. Peter's heart leaped with excitement as he seized his chance. He alighted on the deck as softly as a feather, bare feet padding silently on the wooden planks. The ship groaned and creaked around him, as if whispering secrets of hidden treasures and long-forgotten adventures. With each step, Peter's senses heightened. The rough texture of the deck beneath his feet, the tang of salt in the air, the distant lapping of waves against the hull, all melded into a symphony of danger and excitement. He crept through the shadows, every muscle taut with anticipation. Down in the musty hold, Peter found his friends huddled together. Their faces were etched with fear, but hope flickered in their eyes as they saw him. "Peter," Wendy whispered, her voice trembling with relief. One by one, Peter freed them from their bonds, his fingers working quickly and deftly. "Quiet now," he murmured, pressing a finger to his lips. "We're not out of the woods yet." The children nodded, their hearts pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. Peter could feel their fear, but also their trust in him. It filled him with a fierce determination to see them all to safety. As they made their way back to the deck, a shout rang out, shattering the silence. "Blimey, something's not right here." Peter's pulse quickened, adrenaline surging through his veins. They were running out of time. Taking a deep breath, Peter stepped into the moonlight. He felt the cool light on his skin, saw the shocked faces of the pirates, and knew this was the moment of truth. "Ho there, you bilge rats!" he called out, his voice ringing with bravado. The pirates whirled around, their eyes widening in shock and anger. What followed was a whirlwind of action. Peter soared and dived, his laughter echoing across the deck as he dodged cutlasses and pistol shots. The freed children joined the fray, their fear melting away in the face of Peter's courage. John grabbed a mop, wielding it like a sword, the wet strands slapping against pirate faces. Michael hurled coconuts with surprising accuracy, each thud accompanied by a pirate's yelp of pain. Wendy, her hair streaming behind her like a banner, fought with the fierceness of a lioness protecting her cubs. The deck became a chaotic battlefield, filled with the clash of steel, the thud of fists, and the wild war cries of children who had found their courage. Through it all, Peter was a blur of motion, his dagger flashing in the moonlight as he parried and thrust. The salty air filled with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid smell of gunpowder. As the tide of battle turned, Peter's heart swelled with pride. He watched his friends fight with a bravery that matched any pirate's, their faces flushed with the joy of victory. In that moment, surrounded by the sweet chaos of combat and the salty sea air, Peter felt truly alive. The thrill of battle sang in his veins, a wild, joyous melody that drowned out all fear. His bravery and skill turned the tide against Hook and his crew, inspiring the children to fight with renewed courage. The pirates, outmatched by the sheer determination and spirit of Peter and the children, began to falter. Victory was within their grasp, and the night air rang with the triumphant cheers of the young heroes. But as the last pirate fell, a hush fell over the ship. The air grew thick with tension, like the calm before a storm. Peter's eyes narrowed as he scanned the deck, his instincts screaming that something was amiss. Suddenly, a familiar, menacing chuckle cut through the silence. Captain Hook emerged from the shadows, his hook gleaming in the moonlight. "Well done, Peter Pan," Hook sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "But did you really think it would be that easy?" Peter's grip tightened on his dagger as he faced his arch-nemesis. The Jolly Roger seemed to hold its breath, creaking softly as if in anticipation of the epic battle to come. As Peter and Hook circled each other, the air crackled with the energy of their long-standing rivalry, about to reach its climax. The Jolly Roger erupted into chaos as the final, epic battle began. Peter Pan and Captain Hook faced off, their long-standing rivalry about to reach its climax. The ship's wooden deck creaked and groaned under the weight of the frenzied combat. The salty sea air, thick with the clash of steel and the cries of children and pirates alike. In the eye of this storm, Peter and Hook circled each other like wolves, their gazes locked in a silent, deadly dance. The tension crackled between them, electric and palpable. Peter's heart raced with excitement, his eyes gleaming with mischief and determination. Hook's face was a mask of grim resolve, his hook catching the moonlight with each twitch of his arm. They lunged forward simultaneously, their weapons meeting with a resounding clang that seemed to silence the chaos around them for a heartbeat. Peter moved like quicksilver, his bare feet barely touching the deck as he weaved and dodged. His laughter, bright and taunting, rang out over the din of battle, a stark contrast to Hook's frustrated snarls. "Is that the best you can do, old man?" Peter jeered, ducking under a vicious swipe of Hook's blade. Hook's eyes blazed with fury. "I'll make you pay for your insolence, boy," he roared, redoubling his efforts. Their duel took them from stem to stern, a deadly game of cat and mouse. They leaped over barrels, ducked under ropes, and clambered up rigging. The ship pitched and rolled beneath them, adding an extra layer of danger to their precarious footing. Suddenly, Peter took to the air, soaring just out of Hook's reach. The captain's face contorted with rage as he watched the boy hover tantalizingly close. With a roar that would have made a lion proud, Hook charged toward the mast, scaling the rigging with surprising agility for a man with one hand. High above the deck, their battle resumed with renewed intensity. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of salt and adventure. Peter's ability to fly gave him an edge, but Hook's determination was unwavering. His years of experience showed in every calculated move, every feint and parry. In a heart-stopping moment, Hook's sword found its mark, slicing through the air mere inches from Peter's face. The boy's eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of fear crossing his features for the first time. The cut stung, and Peter felt a trickle of warm blood on his cheek. But Peter Pan was not one to stay rattled for long. The taste of his own mortality only served to fuel his resolve. With renewed vigor, he pressed his attack, his movements becoming a whirlwind of strikes and parries. Hook found himself being driven back, step by step, towards the edge of the rigging. In a final, desperate lunge, Hook overextended himself. Peter saw his chance and seized it, knocking the sword from the captain's hand with a triumphant cry. The weapon spiraled down to the deck below, landing with a clatter that seemed to silence the entire ship. Hook stood there, balanced on the edge, his face a mixture of disbelief and fear. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the two adversaries locked eyes. Peter saw something he had never noticed before in Hook's gaze, a flicker of weariness, of a man tired of fighting an endless war. Then, with a gentle push that belied the weight of the moment, Peter sent Hook tumbling backwards. The captain's scream of terror was cut short as he plunged into the waiting jaws of the crocodile that had long pursued him. The splash echoed across the suddenly silent deck, followed by the fading tick-tock of the clock in the crocodile's belly as it swam away, finally satisfied. A hush fell over the ship, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. With their leader gone, the remaining pirates quickly surrendered or fled, diving overboard in panic. Peter landed lightly on the deck, a wide grin spreading across his face as the reality of their victory sank in. The darling children and the lost boys rushed to surround him, their cheers of joy filling the night air. Wendy's eyes shone with admiration as she looked at Peter, while John and Michael bounced with excitement, reliving the battle in animated gestures. Peter raised his arms, basking in the glow of their adoration. "The Jolly Roger is our," he proclaimed, his voice ringing with triumph. As if by magic, the ship seemed to transform before their eyes. The dark, foreboding vessel that had once struck fear into the hearts of all who saw it now seemed to glow with warmth and possibility. The children scattered across the deck, exploring every nook and cranny with unbridled curiosity. Laughter echoed across the waves as they played with the ship's wheel and peered through spyglasses at the starry sky. Peter took his place at the helm, his chest puffed out with pride. As they sailed off into the night, their hearts were light with the promise of new adventures on the horizon. But as the adrenaline of battle began to fade, Peter noticed something strange. The smiles on the darling children's faces seemed to flicker, like candles in the wind. A shadow passed over Wendy's eyes, and for a moment, Peter thought he saw a tear glistening on her cheek. What was this new feeling that seemed to be creeping over his friends? And why did Peter suddenly feel a strange tightness in his chest, as if something important was slipping away from him? The thrill of victory pulsed through their veins, a heady rush of excitement. But as the adrenaline began to fade, a new feeling crept into the hearts of the darling children. An ache for home bloomed within them, as persistent as the ticking of a clock, reminding them of the time that had slipped away while they played in the magical realm of Neverland. Wendy, John, and Michael huddled together on the soft emerald grass, their eyes distant and misty. The warm breeze carried the scent of adventure, but now it was tinged with something bittersweet. They thought of their parents' warm embraces, the comfort of their own beds, and the familiar sounds of London streets. The realization washed over them like a gentle wave lapping at the shore. It was time to return home. "We must go back," Wendy said softly, her voice a mixture of sadness and excitement. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their impending departure. To everyone's surprise, the lost boys, who had never known a home beyond the wild shores of Neverland, shuffled their feet and exchanged hopeful glances. Their eyes, usually bright with mischief, now shimmered with a new kind of longing. Slightly the bravest of them stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Can. Can we come too? Peter Pan, perched on a nearby rock like a wild creature ready to take flight, watched the scene unfold. His tangled hair ruffled in the breeze, a crown of leaves and twigs adorning his head. His face was a canvas of conflicting emotions: confusion, defiance, and a flicker of fear. "I won't go," he declared, his voice ringing out across the clearing. "I won't grow up." The words hung in the air like a challenge, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of loneliness, a crack in his carefree facade. The group gathered around Peter, their faces a kaleidoscope of emotions: gratitude, affection, and a touch of sorrow. Wendy stepped forward, her blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She reached out, her hand hovering near Peter's cheek, but not quite touching. "We'll miss you, Peter," she said, her voice catching like a leaf in the wind. "But I promise to return for spring cleaning." At her words, Peter's face transformed. The sun seemed to break through clouds, illuminating his features with joy. With a crow of delight that echoed through the trees, he leapt into action, leading them to the newly captured pirate ship. The vessel, once a symbol of fear and danger, now stood as their ticket home, its sails billowing with promise and adventure. As they set sail, the children's hearts were torn between the magic of Neverland and the pull of home. The journey was bittersweet, filled with laughter and stories, but tinged with the knowledge that an extraordinary chapter in their lives was coming to a close. The sea sparkled beneath them, a canvas of blues and greens, as if trying to imprint itself in their memories. London appeared on the horizon like a dream materializing from the mist. Its familiar skyline, a patchwork of chimneys and spires, was a welcome sight that tugged at their heartstrings. Mr. and Mrs. Darling, who had spent countless nights by the open nursery window, their hearts heavy with worry and hope, rushed to greet their children. Tears of joy streamed down their faces as they embraced Wendy, John, and Michael, their family whole once more. The warmth of their hugs felt like coming home after the longest of journeys. In a moment that seemed touched by the very magic of Neverland, Mr. and Mrs. Darling looked at the group of scruffy, hopeful lost boys. Their eyes, filled with love and understanding, took in the sight of these children who had never known a real home. Mrs. Darling's voice, warm and welcoming, broke the silence. "Of course, you can stay." The lost boy's eyes widened with wonder at the concept of parents and a real home, a new adventure unfolding before them. As the years passed, like leaves turning from green to gold, Wendy grew into a young woman. Yet the memories of Neverland remained as vivid as ever, a secret garden in her mind that never withered. She would sit by the fireplace, its warm glow casting dancing shadows, her own children gathered around her. Their eyes were wide with wonder as she spun tales of pirates with gleaming hooks, mermaids with voices like silk, and a boy who could fly through star-studded skies. One night, many years later, when Wendy's hair had begun to silver and laugh lines graced her eyes like a map of happy memories, a familiar figure appeared at her window. Peter Pan, eternally young, hovered there, his silhouette outlined by moonlight. A look of confusion and sadness crossed his face as he realized Wendy had grown up, the passage of time evident in every line and silver strand. But as quickly as the sadness came, it vanished, replaced by curiosity as he spotted a young girl with Wendy's eyes and adventurous spirit. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing at Wendy's daughter, his voice filled with the same wonder he had for every new discovery. Wendy smiled, a bittersweet mixture of nostalgia and joy washing over her like a warm tide. "This is Jane, Peter, my daughter." Peter's face lit up with excitement, his eyes sparkling like the stars he flew among. In a whirlwind of fairy dust and laughter, he whisked Jane away to Neverland, promising to return her just as he had done with Wendy so many years ago. As Wendy watched them disappear into the star-studded sky, a tapestry of twinkling lights and endless possibilities, she knew that the magic of Peter Pan and Neverland would live on. It was a never-ending story, passed down through generations, forever young in the hearts of children. And as the night breeze rustled the curtains, carrying the faint echo of Peter's laugh, Wendy closed her eyes, a smile playing on her lips. In her heart, she was flying once more, soaring through the night sky, forever a part of the magical world where dreams take flight and adventures never truly end.